We're ready, right? Okay. Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Upside Musings podcast. My name is Oke Ndibe. It's my delight to welcome you to this episode. And on behalf of my co-host, Emeka Onyagwa, we hope that you tune in, not only today, but for future episodes. Today, we're going to take a look at perhaps the most important question on the minds of Nigerians. And that question has to do with the expected judgment of the Court of Appeal with regard to petitions filed by the PDP and Labour Party against the declaration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the winner of the February 2023 presidential elections in Nigeria. So there are all kinds of speculations about the likely outcome of it. And all over Nigeria, people are becoming a bit anxious, a bit restive on all sides regarding this judgment and what it's going to portend for Nigeria's political development as well as the development of legal principles as they pertain to elections in Nigeria. So it's my delight to welcome you. And by the way, my co-host, Emeka, just got back from Nigeria. In a forthcoming episode, he's going to be sharing his impressions of the country. But today we're going to focus on the likely outcomes of the presidential elections petitions. Yeah,